It honestly could have been worse, Chase told himself. He could have been killed or worse, and what remained of his family would be abandoned without his protection. Perhaps being locked in a giant freezing dungeon was the better option here, but his mind still prickled with worry. He was perched up on the peeling bed, essentially a mattress-sized bag made of polyethylene stuffed with old cotton. It was annoyingly misshapen, just small enough to convince the sleeper that it would fit them, only for a limb to barely stick out over the edge. It wasn't time for lights out yet, as Rome explained, but clinging nervousness kept Chase from joining the rest of the crowd. Everest could hear Chase tossing and turning above her, and she leaned out of the bunk bed. "You know, if we weren't childhood friends, I'd beat the shit out of you for making so much noise." "I'm just trying to get comfortable up here." Chase was mildly unnerved by the words. "I take you've never been to jail before. We have unspoken rules here, just like Rome said." "Everest, I used to send people to jail." Before he could say anything else, Everest scampered up the bunk bed and clamped her paws around Chase's muzzle, forcing him to be quiet. "Do not say that out loud!" she hissed, staring into his eyes with a panicked expression. "Lord, Chase! Seriously, don't let anyone—" She paused to look around, checking for eavesdroppers. "Do not let anyone even think that you were once a cop!" The shepherd blinked with widened eyes, emitting a muffled word within his shut mouth. She released him with a pained sigh, sitting down next to her old friend. "Life in here, it's hard to get used to. You have to talk different, think different, and be prepared for anything. The real problems happen when dogs get too bored and start making their own fun, with ways that get the guards called on us. Then you just sit back and watch as someone gets beaten nearly to death." "How do you live in here?" Chase said, frowning at his friend's resignation. The husky he knew was always full of life, laughing and taking life head-on with not a moment wasted. To see her broken and defeated brought a weeping feeling in his chest. "You don't," Everest shrugged. "The others will say they do, and I honestly don't know how they can. You have no identity here, and everyone's just fine with it?" She looked at him with quizzing eyes. "I don't know what kind of lives these dogs had, Chase, but they don't seem too concerned about their future." She pointed her ears at the group of inmates laughing over a competitive game of cards. "We come from many places, all from different histories. It's interesting to learn about them." "Rome told me you all pissed off Arcline in some way," Chase said, feeling more comfortable in the presence of an old friend. "Did he?" "Well, that's not actually the case. He just said that to make you feel better." The husky watched the group, scanning each dog. "Some of us are actual prison inmates, sold to the Arcline Foundation to be used as test subjects. But they never take them right away. They just keep them in here in the event they're needed. The last dog we saw get dragged off was roughly a few months ago." "So there's—" Chase lowered his voice. "Actual criminals here?" "Rome, his real name's Roman for starters, apparently broke into someone's home," Everest began, tucking her paws under her fur. "He was too laced on drugs to see the owner coming downstairs. An altercation ensues. The owner gets killed, a house pet gets assaulted, and he flees the scene." "He's killed someone?" "Yeah, and so have a lot of other dogs in here." She tilted her head at the shepherd, her voice fading off with astonishment. "That's the thing. Whenever you hear about criminals like that, you'd be terrified at the thought of them, and reasonably so. But when I was first dumped in here, and everyone saw me come in, do you know what Rome did? He didn't hurt me, didn't rape me, didn't mock, tease, or even put me on the spot. He simply helped me up, smiled, and asked my name." She shook her head, unable to understand the life she was living. "He introduced me to the rest of the inmates, and that was it. These dogs. It's bewildering, frankly," she continued, watching the rest of the group. "He didn't deny he did it, never changed his story or shifted the blame. He completely owned it, and he's somehow one of the nicest dogs in here. He brought me food trays, made sure I ate regularly, and within a few hours with him, it already felt like he'd take a bullet for me. Chase listened to her with piqued interest. I never really knew the people I was sent after as a pup. You just put the handcuffs on them and they get hauled off. Now, not everyone in here is like that, believe me. Everest shifted her gaze to an idle dog sitting alone on a bed. Some of us are not to be approached, but dogs like Rome are certainly around. Well, I'm glad this room isn't full of serial killers, Chase muttered. But I still can't stay here. Dutch has Rocky and Marshall, and knowing how long Arcline's been after us, I don't really want to think about what'll happen to them. Did you see what he's capable of? Who? Dutch. He's weird. The shepherd thought back to the one-sided fight with the executive. He doesn't move like a normal animal. Given how utterly insane and narrow-minded these genetic researchers are, I'm not surprised. Everest chuckled. Who knows what they're doing to themselves? Anyway, you don't have to sit up here for hours, you know. You gotta come down at some point. Chase flashed a nervous look at the general crowd. I'm not sure. Oh, don't be a stranger, Everest smiled, hopping down to the floor. I'll teach you how to play the card games we like. Come on, we have a whole table to ourselves. Chase hesitated, looking over the bunk bed's edge. Just stepping on the floor alone seemed to place a target on his back, but with Everest, it should be relatively safer. She knew him after all, and he knew her. Alright, he nodded and jumped down to join her. They played gin rummy for a while, mostly consisting of Chase staring at his cards in absolute confusion while Everest giggled at his frustration. The husky leaned on her paw with an endearing smirk as she watched her friend fall all over himself. Can I use cards that are different colors? He asked, on the verge of hyperventilating. Nope, has to all be one suit, so the same color, Everest replied, deviancy rolling off her tongue. She tightly held her own hand of cards, keeping them carefully concealed. God, what do you have? Chase realized her mischievous look, a wave of fear hitting him. What crazy move are you about to make that'll win you the game? I haven't even played a card yet, Chase. Not yet, but you will! The shepherd pointed an accusatory paw. I'm gonna play a thing, then you're gonna smirk and reveal some massive bullshit play that completely ravages me and... Dude! The husky laughed. Just play something! Fine. Here. Chase slapped 3 cards on the table. 15 points. Shove it! He swiped a new card off the deck, making sure his opponent saw the scrunching glare on his face. His demeanor appeared hostile, but Chase was gleefully enjoying himself, immersed in a fun game with someone he put off for dead for so long ago. Everest scanned the move. Oh, I needed that card. Go figure. There was a glint in her eye. I guess I'll just do this instead. Ignoring Chase's dismay, she swiftly unloaded nearly half her cards onto the table. 3 of a kind, 4 for the heart row, 3 for the spade row. I can play off the row you already have. She rearranged the cards a little. And I believe that's around 55 points. Tossing his cards aside, Chase pulled an unamused expression. Cheater! Sorry, I've been playing this for years, Everest said, gleefully counting up her final score. You'll eventually get the hang of it. You just need to play more often. Rome's piercing voice shot through the air, catching everyone in the cell block. Door's coming! He was standing at the door, peeking through the bars with a panicked expression. Much to Chase's confusion, the entire area suddenly exploded into action. Inmates scattered in all directions, sweeping up the table games and shoving things under their mattresses. Get the shower curtain down! Rome barked, running into the fray as towels and playing cards went flying. Shower curtain? Chase looked at Everest with a puzzled look. There's a... The husky got up from the table.
There's some stuff in here that we're really not supposed to have. Guys in here just love to break the rules for some reason.
Chase watched with bewilderment as everyone scrambled like ants, sprinting to hide or dispose of their contraband.
Were all jails like this?
His ears turned at the sound of approaching footsteps, 3 sets of them, stopping at the door and followed with a creaking twist of machinery. The inmates shoved away what was left of their illegal items and faced the entry with nervous anticipation, although others seemed more dismissive and barely looked over. The metal door swung open, 2 fully geared Arc-Line soldiers marching in. They stood in place, scoping out the room and passing their masked eyes around each prisoner.
"Sup, blue shirts?"
Rome gestured. "Not now, Rome." One of the guards held a paw at him, already wanting him to cease talking.
"It's showtime, meatbags! Chase, Everest, come forward!"
His heart skipping a beat, Chase faltered with surprise at his name being called. He looked wearily at Everest, but she didn't return the look, being caught off guard herself.
"What are you, deaf?"
the guard snapped.
"Step forward, both of you!" "Easy, big man!"
Rome held up his paws defensively.
"You can't just barge in and expect us not to be surprised." "I'm right here."
Chase approached the guard, his body tense with nervousness. Everest followed behind him, choosing to not say anything. The armored dog looked both of them up and down. "Great. Dutch wants you both." "Great," Chase said, his body deflating.
"Me?"
Everest looked quizzically at the soldier.
"I figured I was left in here to rot."
"Funny how that happens, eh?" The guard circled them, stopping directly behind to usher them out. "Now move! We don't have all day!" Before they could say anything, Chase found himself being pushed from behind, the guard practically shoving them out if any more force was applied. Was he being set free? How free exactly was someone in the darkened abyss of the Arc-Line Foundation? Her face widened with astonishment. Everest looked back at her fellow inmates, feelings she couldn't describe circulating through her mind.
"Wait, what about them?"
she asked. "Shut up and move!" quipped the soldier, forcing them out of the room.
"Don't worry about us!"
Rome called, jumping onto one of the tables. The second guard spotted him.
"Hey, get off the—"
He was ignored by the inmate.
"Farewell, Frost and Chase! This is our life to live, not yours! Be free!"
His voice drowned out as the door was shut. Chase and Everest walked out into the freezing hallways. Even with his lingering fears of what was coming, Chase was overjoyed to be out of there. It was simply a life he couldn't live, a scenario he could never prepare himself for. Everest walked with a remorseful frown, her paws dragging with a sorrow she couldn't find words to explain. Rocky was led into a dark room of sleek, shining surfaces. There were windows on each side, with dozens of animals staring at him wearing white lab coats. The immense amount of attention made him uneasy, and he wondered if he had just walked into a live testing facility. There were 2 sets of doors, the closed entry he just arrived through, and a tightly sealed passage in front of him. One of the scientists spoke into a microphone, her voice coming through on the loudspeaker.
"Subject is sealed in. Beginning the decontamination process."
Rocky looked around, an unnerving feeling in his stomach.
What are you talking about?
Before he could react, dozens of nozzles appeared from the walls, releasing geysers of clear, rich-smelling liquid. The mixed breed flinched and spluttered as he was assaulted from all angles, each inch of his body soaked in freezing chemicals. There it was again. That grappling, clenching feeling of being wet. Rocky struggled to not break down as his mind blared with panic, alarms coursing all throughout his body. The water drained through some grates on the floor, and the scientist spoke again.
"Stage 1 complete. Beginning stage 2.
Quit!
Rocky tried to speak, but his voice was deafened by roaring air dryers bludgeoning into the room. Hot air seared into him on all sides, vaporizing the waters and leaving burns anywhere his fur couldn't protect.
Stage 2 complete.
The scientist said, pressing some buttons on the control panel.
Test subject, you are free to proceed to the gates of heaven.
Her voice lowered to a stern warning.
It would be best to not keep Dutch waiting.
Before he could spit an insult, the 2 doors ahead of him sounded an alarm, sliding open into the further hallway. The workers watched him, each one emotionless in observation. Rocky shook himself off, fluffing his fur a little and shooting dirty looks at the workers. Swallowing his fears, the mix proceeded forward with the path, walking into the darkness that awaited him. Rocky emerged in a room that completely took his breath away. He left a hallway that was narrow in size, now suddenly opening to a supermassive auditorium-sized cavern. The entire area was brightly lit with dozens of floodlights plugged into generators, illuminating the corners of the cave. Gone were the sleek finish of the facility. Rocky had stepped out onto the bare earth. A set of metal stairs brought him down to a floor of dirt and stone, the path laid out with steel grating. On each far side of the cavern stood small towers constructed from steel pipes and scaffolding, holding up various pieces of equipment. Dozens of cameras and recording devices littered the floor. Dogs in hazmat suits were entering and leaving each tower. His eyes locked forward, staring in awe at the gigantic structure that stood between the towers. Colossal square segments of constructed machinery formed a ring, circling around a wall made of steel and concrete. The whole thing was slightly buried into the ground, appearing as a giant gateway to an unexplainable world behind it. Marshall was standing before the gateway, looking up at it with astonishment. Rocky spotted him and swiftly darted over.
Marshall!
He called, appearing at his side.
You alright? What is this thing?
The Dalmatian stared up.
I don't know, but we're probably about to find out. Seriously, are you alright? You got hit pretty hard back there, and I was worried.
I'm fine, Captain. Marshall sighed, a small wince on his face.
I think we have more pressing matters right now.
Appearing out of the towers, Ryder walked across the cave floor to them, hands behind his back.
Glad to see you recovered,
he said to the medic.
Piss off!
Rocky growled, glaring at their old owner. Ryder frowned at him, sighing at their animosity. There's no time for that, Rocky. You're working with me whether you like it or not. Standing beside them, the boy held out his arm to the gateway. Welcome to the gates of heaven, pups. What's behind here is something you never believe. The Omni Hive, said Rocky flatly. Dutch already told me. Marshall looked at him with a puzzled look. What? I've been in there, Ryder continued. Not for very long, but I've seen it. A faint shudder went through his body, the leader's voice holding a twinge of fear.
It's quite an experience.
Stepping a little closer to his captain, Marshall leaned into Rocky's ear.
Are we going to see Feroxmalis again?
A rising feeling uneased the medic, notes of fear starting to emerge from where they had been pushed so long ago. Feroxmalis is dead. As if saying the words made it true, Dutch said aloud, walking over to the group. The 3 of them turned to face him, Ryder crossing his arms while the dogs went on edge. Rocky braced himself in the presence of the executive, but his eyes wandered into the near distance and spotted a familiar face. Chase and Everest had just crossed through decontamination, emerging before the gates of heaven.
Chase!
Marshall ran for him, relief flooding his voice.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. Everyone's fine. Chase happily gave his brother a hug. What about you, though? Did you just wake up here? I don't even know what happened. The medic shook his head. All I remember is Ryder, and then I'm suddenly in a brand new infirmary. Guard dragged me out of bed and brought me here. Well, welcome to the Arcline Foundation, Marshall. Everest walked up, her eyes beaming with joy.
Yeah, thanks.
The Dalmatian did a double take, realizing who was standing in front of him. He didn't believe it at first, his mind almost rendering her as a ghost. He tried to say a few words but stuttered over them, paralyzed in place by his old friend.
Still the baby of the patrol, I see.
Everest gave him a small lick on the nose.
What?
Marshall snaps back to reality.
Hey, I'm not... Why does everyone call me that?
He ignored Chase's suppressed chuckle.
Everest, you're alive!
Said the elated dog, embracing the husky with a hug.
I never thought I'd see you again! How are you?
Although happy to greet him, a hint of sorrow flashed in her voice. Oh, the stories I could tell. She let him go and nodded to Rocky, who warmly nodded back. They didn't know each other that well, but after years of agony endured on both sides, any friendly face was a welcome one. Seeing the boy standing before the gates, Everest nodded at him as well.
Ryder!
She called.
It's good to see you alive and well!
You don't know? Chase looked at her.
Don't know what?
What he did, the shepherd hissed, narrowing his eyes at the boy. Ryder joined the group, butting into the conversation. None of that matters now. We need to focus on the present and prepare ourselves for what's coming. Having observed the entire scene in stoic silence, Dutch brushed off his jacket and stalked over. Well, it's been a lovely family reunion, but I believe it's time to move along. Right. Rocky leered at him.
You're just gonna dump us all into the Omni Hive?
No, Dutch said, barely looking his way.
What kind of unorganized mess do you take me for, Captain? You honestly believe I'd do something so reckless without any kind of plan? After hearing all the bullshit you spat out in the meeting room, I kinda do.
The Malinois pretended not to hear him. Listen, I'm splitting you up into 2 squads. Ryder, Rocky, and Marshall will take my selected research team into the Omni Hive. You'll set up camp at the established outpost and get to work.
Doing what?
Marshall asked. Whatever I tell you to do. Dutch leered at him. A trio of dogs left the tower, walking over to join the crowd. They were dressed in white, carrying mechanical backpacks likely stocked full of gear. They were almost identical, the only difference being their breeds. A husky, a black Labrador, and a Doberman. The executive beckoned them over. This is the research team going with you. They will accompany you in, and I expect you to protect them along the way. As Rocky looked over at his new companions, trying to scan them for personalities, Dutch turned to the remaining 2. Chase and Everest, I have a different task for you.
We aren't going with them?
Chase said worriedly. Did I say you were? No. Since both of you appear capable of destroying bioweapons, no doubt you're more than able for the core mission in hand.
You make it sound like we killed them with our bare paws,
Everest noted, an exasperated look on her face. The dark animal gave her only a single look before speaking again. You 2 will travel to the Omni Hive Nexus, secure whatever it is they're protecting, and bring it back to me. And if we get horrifically killed along the way? Chase flattened his ears, challenging him. The executive leaned right into him, hissing through his teeth. Then I'll send one of your brothers instead. His words searing into Chase's mind, the shepherd daydreamed about hundreds of ways he could kill the bastard standing in front of him. Able to read the anger on his face, Everest placed her paw on his, a desperate attempt to calm him down in the face of danger. A scientist walked up, clipping gray collars around the 2, each one bearing the symbol of Arcline. These radio collars will keep us connected, Dutch said. Can't have you walking off on me. The others will have them too, but on a different channel. I can't talk to my brother? No, you may not. Dutch waved him off. Now, why don't we get this show on the road? He turned to look up at one of the towers, barking up into the air.
Open the gate!
A scientist standing up top saluted him and turned a key on a control panel nearby. He flashed a signal to the opposite tower, and they did the same. A red alarm went off, workers all over the clearing quickly scampering for the towers to get out of the way. Rocky and Chase watched the fray with unease, their minds struggling to comprehend the terror rising in their minds. Everest fluffed out her fur, a hopeless defense mechanism that exposed her fearfulness. Ryder and Marshall merely stared up at the gates of heaven, watching like something was supposed to happen. The research team wasn't even remotely fazed by the action, each one counting their inventory. Dutch took a final look back at the group, his face sliding into a grin, then vanished into one of the towers. The alarm sounded again, with a roaring tear of metal and concrete machinery. The gates of heaven came to life, slowly opening its gaping mouth to a darkened cave tunnel. The rancid smell of wet filth quickly emanated out, Everest and Marshall twisting their noses in disgust. Chase and Rocky grimaced as the smell hit them, the stench reawakening vile memories from the depths of their minds. All dogs braced themselves, Ryder and the researchers taking deep breaths. The doors fully opened, granting passage to the dark, jagged cave tunnel.
Proceed!
Dutch's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Each one making peace in their heart, the group proceeded forward, crossing through the gates. Ryder led the group, the research team behind them, and the ACG soldiers last. Rocky gave an uncertain look back to his friends and newly acquired Everest. Not one could find words to say, their minds clouded as they crossed over into the new world.